Welcome back to Season 2 of the Voices of Long COVID podcast. I'm your host, Noelle. This season, I'll be bringing you strategies and support for living with our condition and discussing current themes around the topic of long COVID. I hope you'll find the information useful. On today's episode, I'm joined by someone who knows all too well what it's like to have your life completely altered by long COVID. Greta Morgan is an American singer and songwriter who has fronted bands such as The Hush Sound and Gold Motel and was a touring member of the band Vampire Weekend. She has written her first book, which comes out on May 20th, called The Lost Voice. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here and sharing some of your story with me. Music has been a big part of your life since you were a child. Can you talk a bit about your musical background and how important music is to you?
Yeah, well, I wanted to start playing the piano the moment I could sit up on the piano bench. I was drawn to it from a very young age. I loved very particular kinds of songs. I loved songs with a swing. I loved 50s and 60s pop songs and blues songs when I was a very, very little kid. And I just thought as a child that songs were like spells, and all the Disney movies that I watched affirmed that belief. So I would see Snow White singing and a bird would come to her hand, or I would see Ariel from The Little Mermaid singing her dream about wanting to walk up on the streets where the people are, and then, suddenly she has legs and she's doing it. And so my impression as a little kid was like, whoa, songs, that's how you change your reality. And I started writing songs in kind of a rambunctious way. I would like remix Beethoven when my piano teacher wanted me to learn for Elise. And I was just always instinctually writing songs, but I kind of became serious about songwriting when my parents got divorced when I was 11. And that's when I realized, oh, I can use this as an emotional survival technique. Like I can write a song that transforms my emotions from something painful into something beautiful. And it was at that point that I really began songwriting as a way of understanding what was happening in my inner world and just a way of like living a good life. I've joked before, I think one of the reasons I'm such a happy, uh, easygoing person is because I've written so many sad songs.
So it's a way to process emotions for you.
Yeah, it always happened.
Yeah. What did your voice mean to you throughout your musical career, not only professionally, but personally?
Yeah, well, personally, it was a way of understanding the truths of my inner world and a way of really connecting to my subconscious. One thing I say in the book is like my voice would tell me the truth, my songs would tell me the truth so much sooner than my conscious mind could. So often when I was singing a melody and just kind of mumbling my way through different words, the words would be truer than anything I could consciously admit to myself or say in conversation with another person. So my voice and singing was always like how I found out what was happening on the deeper levels of being. And once I became a professional musician, when I started my band, The Hush Sound, when I was 15, and we were signed when I was 17, once I became a professional musician, my voice became like the thing I was most rewarded for. So the thing that sort of generated praise and attention. And my voice began to be not only my livelihood, but also like how I formed friendships, how I formed love relationships. It was just completely how I showed up in the world.
Wow. You've had success as the front woman for many different bands and also on tour as a part of Vampire Weekend, singing at sold out shows in venues like Madison Square Garden. And your goal after this latest tour was to shift focus onto your solo music. And then March of 2020 happened. What were the circumstances that led you to being infected with COVID and then developing long COVID?
Yeah, well, it's been quite a long journey because I've had three different COVID encounters. So I was on tour with Vampire Weekend in 2020, and we played one last festival, the Okeechobee Festival in Florida. And it was during a weekend when almost all the other festivals had been canceled. It was like right as the world was shutting down. It was 2 or 3 days before the NBA announced that the season was going to be canceled. So I think everyone remembers where they were at that time. And when I came back, I was really sick with an incredibly high fever. It was the most nightmarish psychedelic fever I had ever had. And I've barely ever been sick in my life. I was someone who had a pretty perfect track record of health, no chronic illness. I swam across lakes. I climbed to the top of Yosemite Falls, 2,000 feet up. I hiked every day. I went to workout classes. I played 2.5 hour sets. Like I had what I thought was invincible health. And I ate a, clean California, don't panic, it's organic kind of diet. Like I thought my body was a perfect machine. So after the first infection of COVID, I noticed like my voice had been had these tiny flickers in the real upper range a couple months before this happened. But after COVID, all of a sudden the top half of my range was like I couldn't access it. And my voice would tremble and shake uncontrollably when I was trying to hold a pitch. And even my speaking voice wobbled. And I felt this sense of almost like my throat closing up on itself. So when I would try to sing a high note, it almost felt like there was a knot in my throat. The knot got tighter whenever I tried to push or sing. Um, I later was diagnosed with spasmodic dysphonia, and I learned that what was happening is that my vocal cords were slamming shut involuntarily, which explained that kind of squeeze down feeling in the throat.
Hmm.
Spasmodic dysphonia is a neurological voice disorder with no known cure. Typically comes on in people's 30s, and it's usually caused by three things, which is a fever, psychological stress, and vocal overuse. Which, when the doctor diagnosed me, I was like, check, check, check. So my first experience with COVID triggered this voice issue, which I'm now 5 years into, and I still haven't recovered my former vocal access. So I'm working with a much different, dramatically altered voice now. But then during I'd say from 2020 to 2023, my body was still, or I'd say 2020 to 2022, my voice had been altered, but my body was still very strong. So I was still, going for 40-mile bike rides and hikes and camping and all these big adventures. I had subsequent COVID infections in 2022 and 2023. And after each of those, I had different physiological impacts, which have dramatically altered my physical abilities. So after the one in 2022, I went from walking about 8 miles a day to not be able to walk more than about a quarter mile or a half a mile. And I began a long, kind of a holistic functional medicine approach to healing my body. I was getting IV, vitamin C IVs, and super healthy diet and juicing and just, all those things. But then when I had COVID in 2023, that was the kicker because that was when I had extreme neurological fatigue and extreme physical fatigue. It was so bad that when I was accepted into the Mayo Clinic's long COVID program, I was preparing myself to be diagnosed with a brain tumor because I thought, there is no way this is what long COVID is. I was like, there's no way it can possibly feel this bad. And at that time, I was in a position where, like, some days, if I did my laundry, I would be incapacitated for days in bed, like extreme post-exertional malaise. I also, in 2023, had two major medical emergencies related to my thyroid and my heart, having never had thyroid or heart issues. And they were, the doctors were basically like, it's so mysterious. They must have been an ambient issue. We can't figure out what it is. Once I went to the Mayo Clinic in January of 2023 and was seen by Dr. Ryan Hurt, who's amazing. He had at that point treated 3,000 long COVID patients, and he really like shone the light on how all of these things were connected. And my case, someone who had a perfect track record, to suddenly having extreme neurological and physical challenges, it all made sense for what they had been seeing. And essentially, the way they treat long COVID is as a nervous system disease. Like the body
Hmm.
overreacts to fighting COVID or fighting dead virus in the body, or the immune system has been dramatically altered since an infection. And when the immune system is overworking, it causes inflammation through the brain, the nervous system, and the body. And so, with their care, I began to treat long COVID as a nervous system disease. And now like I'm living in a new normal of life. Which is much more, God, I'm so much better than I was a year ago. But it's a total,
That's awesome.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, but it's a totally different, I'm living a totally different reality than I was a few years ago.
Yeah, like so many of us, I'm just nodding my head because yeah, I identify with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, I read your new memoir, The Lost Voice. I loved it. Your writing is so beautiful. It was emotional, full of humor, and also so poignant. I identified with so much of what you wrote. I was in tears by the end of the very first line
Mhm.
when you said, "You never know when it's the last time."
Mhm.
I knew exactly what you meant by that because I've experienced that loss. I'm not a musician, but I too lost my career because of long COVID. I was a teacher for 25 years, and losing that career, I mean, that was my identity. You write about losing your voice, which, as a musician, is your main instrument, and for you, is your deeply personal method of self expression. What was it like the moment you realized that a big part of your identity, your singing voice, might not come back?
Yeah, well, the description that I use in the book, it still feels very true, which is that I say it felt like a guillotine landed in my life. And there was this very clear dividing line where up until this point, I had been living in a way where I knew exactly who I was, exactly what my purpose was, exactly what I loved. I had this very single-minded focus on music. And when they diagnosed me, and then when I had all the subsequent second and third and fourth and fifth opinions, it just felt like I had been launched unintentionally into a kind of life that was so mysterious. I had no idea who I would be or what I would do in that new version of life.
At what point did the idea for writing the book come to you? And did the writing itself become a way to reclaim your voice?
Definitely, yeah. So my diagnosis was October of 2020, and they had told me the only treatment for spasmodic dysphonia is to inject your vocal cords with Botox basically every 3 months for the rest of your life. So my attitude is always like, let's see if we can treat the root causes here. So I
Yeah.
decided I went on this kind of holistic exploration of all these different techniques to heal, EMDR and speech therapy and psychedelic exploration, and diet and cleanse. I say more cleanses than Gwyneth Paltrow in the book. I tried all these different things, and after about 4 or 5 months, nothing was working. And that was when I started writing on the page. I had gone to Escalante, Utah by myself, which is this tiny town. It was in the winter of 2021. And I brought with me very few things, but one of them was a box of journals. And I had both my mother's journals with her permission and my own. And during that time, I read her journals. One of the things I noticed is that though she was a published author she's released some writing, she used to work for ABC News. Still, I found in her journals this version of her voice that was so potent and so visceral and so poetic. And that particular version of her voice had never been in the writing that she shared with the public.
Mm.
So when I was reading that, this idea kind of started to form in my mind that, oh, what I'm experiencing right now, which I think I should be like ashamed of, I lost the perfect thing that made me me. I was like, oh, the experience I'm having right now, that's actually what I should be writing about. Like that's the true thing. And as a songwriter, I would always write about what was happening in real time. And since I wasn't able to sing, I started just writing on the page about what was happening in real time. And I also was trying to track through my history to see if there were any moments where emotionally I had silenced myself or been silenced by someone else. I was sort of looking for the emotional underpinnings of the physical issue. And once I started writing on the page, it became a love story, much like when I first discovered writing music. So it was very, very unexpected.
I can say that you've definitely found an outlet as an author. It was so great to read your story.
Oh, thank you.
You talk in your book about the common origin story of your favorite artists, that they all had something ripped from them. And rather than be consumed by it, art flowed into that space. I'd never really thought of it in that way before, but when I thought about all of my favorite artists, Matisse lost his mobility, O'Keeffe and Monet both lost their eyesight, and they all had to, you know, they continued to make art, but in adapted ways. And you mention in your book, suffering can cause great creativity, and you have to lean into the grit to make a pearl. Did losing your voice and facing that grief head on both force you and allow you to find other ways to express your creativity?
Yeah, it definitely did. And I just want to let me begin by just saying for the record, I I don't want to have to suffer just to make art. And I wouldn't wish this type of suffering on even my worst enemy. But when I was in a position of having lost the thing I love the most, to me, the only helpful response is to look for meaning and to find new meaning. And for me, um, choosing to treat the loss of my literal singing voice as an invitation for this new metaphorical voice on the page, that sort of trade gave me meaning to keep going and to keep feeling alive and to keep feeling like my spirit wanted to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just as you say, it's what we've gone through, what all long COVID sufferers have gone through is so extreme and so difficult. But if you can find meaning, it really helps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so hard. I think one of the hardest things about long COVID is that people who had super easy experiences with COVID really don't understand.
No.
Like in my Mayo Clinic support group, they linked us up with a couple people, and there was one man from North Dakota who had been a construction worker, and he now had to quit his job and was in bed all day with long COVID, and his family, who thinks COVID isn't real, were just calling him lazy. And then
Mm-hmm.
a woman from Alaska who was a dog sledder who chopped all her own wood, was this avid outdoors woman. Same thing, like she could barely get outside, and her family was just sort of confused about what was happening. So it's a very isolating experience, not only in the sense that you often have to leave behind the things that make you you, but also you enter this new territory where even the people who love you the most might not understand what's happening.
Yeah, it definitely adds insult to injury
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah, totally.
We'll be back to our interview after a short break. This podcast is dedicated to all the long COVID sufferers out there. I hope you find a sense of community by hearing these episodes and maybe find some tips on how to make living with this illness just a little bit easier. Did music still have a place in your healing, or did you need to distance yourself from it for a while?
Yeah, I couldn't listen to voices for almost a year. Like I couldn't, any of my favorite singers, it was like breaking my heart over and over and over. And it was only, yeah, I listened basically to ambient and instrumental music for almost a year. And it was only once I felt confident that my voice on the page was becoming my main expression. It was like once that love story was really, I became securely bonded to my writing. Once that was there, then I could listen to music again.
Hmm. Yeah, for a while I couldn't set foot in a school.
Oh, yeah.
I,
Oh,
I feel like I'm past that now, but yeah, it's tough. It's definitely I feel like it's the before times and the after times.
yes,
You know,
totally.
the life you were leading and then this brand new life.
Right. Yeah.
For many people, the beginning of the pandemic was a chance to press the reset button on their lives for a brief moment. For those of us who got sick with COVID and then long COVID, we suddenly found ourselves in an extended period of forced stillness, forced to learn how to rest and do a lot of self examination. In your book, you talk about experiencing a time of turning inward. Did you discover any new parts of yourself, strengths or qualities that you might not have found without this experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a bunch that I write about in the book from my first experiences of really being alone and in silence in the desert in Utah and some of the Southwest Plateau, the Colorado Plateau. But I would say some of the bigger experiences have been in this kind of second arc of long COVID, which is when I've had chronic fatigue. And I almost feel like I've been on a quest within my own body and within my own imagination. You know, some people go out and climb Mount Everest, and I feel like that's what I'm doing in my mind. Like I just with
Oh,
this
yeah.
with this many hours where I've been resting, every single like demon or angel that has ever lived in my psyche has risen up and started talking to me. And cultivating the kind of unconditional self-love that I have now has been so valuable. Like when I had to move home in the summer of 2022 after I had a thyroid storm and then a heart emergency, and I was unable to care for myself for 2 months. And during that time, I made a promise to my body, and I said, if you become strong enough that I can like just go for a walk. You know, that was kind of all I wanted. If I could be strong enough to walk up and down the stairs and go for a walk around the neighborhood, I will never, ever, ever criticize you, my beautiful body, ever again. I was like, you will never be too slow. You will never be 5 pounds overweight. Your voice will never be too shaky or out of tune. Like I was basically like, let's make a deal. If I can go for a walk, I will be kind to my body for the rest of my life. And I will say that has become a guiding principle. Like nothing has become more important than my relationship with tending to my body. And I'm grateful to have that lesson as much as I wish it didn't have to come in this kind of form.
Hmm. Yeah, we're definitely forced to face emotions and everything head on. There's our ways of escaping that are different now.
Yeah,
We can't just, climb a mountain or go for a run
right.
or yeah.
Totally. Yeah, one of the things I did that I love the most is just finding sit spots in the mountains. So, I'll walk 5 or 10 minutes, but I have all these kind of, oh, that place by the creek, and oh, that place leaning against that tree, and oh, the line of birches, and oh, so I will just kind of go into the woods and meditate for a couple hours as opposed to doing a 2-hour hike. Um,
Hmm.
that's been really healing as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with a list of places that have that easy access,
Mhm.
but it's challenging because I'm used to hiking, 5-10 kilometers and getting to the middle of nowhere. So the challenge is, how do you get to the middle of nowhere without exerting yourself?
Right. Yeah. I mean, my answer is pretty extreme, which is that I moved to the middle of nowhere. I moved to
That's a solution.
a solution that is, really only appropriate for someone who can make that decision for themselves. I don't have kids who are in school or anything like that. But yeah, I moved to the Catskills to this very enchanting part of the mountain range, mainly because I thought this is the kind of place that's so beautiful that no matter how sick I am, I can have great days here.
I love that. You learn to find different aspects of your voice to sing in a different way, and then recorded a song called Vanishing Path in 2022. My favorite lyric is, I know who I was, but not who I will be. There is so much unknown when we are dealing with chronic illness. A big lesson is learning how to let go of control and to maybe work on acceptance. Was acceptance part of the healing process for you?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. One part that got cut from the book was that I wrote that people say there are 5 stages of grief, but I thought grief was more like a wheel of fortune, where like every day I'm like, what's it gonna be? Denial, anger, but what's it gonna be today? Like it was not in any order at all. But I do think I there's kind of a paradox because I want to truly accept what's happening and honor the limitations and honor, at times I've honored the very real potential. Like I might not get that much better. I hope I will. I'm doing everything to improve my health, but I don't know. So on one hand, there's this desire to surrender and accept what's happening. And then on the other hand, there's this kind of choice to find as much joy as possible within the circumstance. My friend Mary Evelyn Pritchard once said that health is the amount of joy in a person's life. And even people with chronic
Mm,
illness can aspire to that.
that's awesome. Yeah. I've kind of come to the conclusion that I can handle acceptance in bite-sized chunks. So
Tell me more.
I can accept that this is my reality today.
Yes, I so relate to that.
I'm not thinking about 10 years from now or, that's too daunting,
Right.
but I can think about today. I can, even sometimes it's 1 hour at a time or 1 minute at a time.
Yes. Yeah.
But I can accept that this is my reality today and I'm not giving up. I'm still, I'm going to Texas next week to try a medical procedure there. I'm not giving up. I want to get better, but this is my reality today. And then you're not fighting against your own psyche and, exerting energy, fighting against your reality.
Well, and the future isn't promised to anyone. So it's
No.
COVID or long or not, chronic illness or not, living life 1 hour at a time is actually such a beautiful invitation. I feel that
Mm-hmm.
way very much, very, very much. Also, one of the things I've been doing the past couple months, which has really helped, is brain retraining. Have you come across that? Yeah. I mean, can we nerd out on that for a second?
Sure.
Okay, well, just one of the things, speaking of 1 hour at a time, one of the things I learned in brain retraining is just whenever a person stresses about their symptoms, they automatically exacerbate the symptoms because stress causes like a flood of, stress hormones in the body, which automatically trigger the nervous system, trigger the immune system. So one of the things brain retraining does, which I'm in the Gupta brain retraining program, highly recommend.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things it does is it teaches you how to calm your body as soon as a symptom arises. I can just rest. I can just like at that point I renamed long COVID sleeping beauty syndrome. It's like oh okay, I just need 10 times as much rest and repair as I used to. And I can rebuild my life around that. Anyway, that was a really helpful kind of hour to hour survival and thriving approach.
Yeah, reframing it and not getting emotional about it. And the more you fight it and the more you struggle with it, the longer your crash or your setback is going to be, for sure.
Totally. And I also will say I'm only speaking from personal experience in that like I never want it to feel like I'm prescribing anything to anyone else because everyone's journey with illness is so different. And I do believe we all have our own unique intuition about what will help us.
Mm-hmm. With everything you had been through, what was recording with your new voice like for you? Did you have to take a different approach when recording?
Yeah, well, there's a scene in the book of one of my first professional recording sessions when I'm 17, and I had just been signed to a record label, and it was the first time my band, the Hush Sound, had these like very big producers working on the record. And the producers were really kind of telling me how to sing in ways that felt pretty unnatural to me. Like I really like these producers as people, but we were kids. And I was like a high school virgin, and they were telling me like you should try to sing it the way Fiona Apple sings, which Fiona Apple has this like husky, gritty, powerful voice, like the night and day, what our voices sounded like. So I described this kind of desire when I was younger to like train my voice to be the way they wanted it to be. Whereas cut to the Vanishing Path recording session, I had lost my voice. I had finally tried multiple rounds of shots to acquire or to return a certain amount of my voice back, but it was very different. But the attitude with which I recorded then was like, I love my voice no matter what it sounds like. And I had so much gratitude to be able to sing at that point that in a way it was almost like I tossed some of that unconditional love back to my younger self. Like I had this moment of nobody's telling me how to sing but me now. And like I love my voice no matter how it sounds. And that felt really healing.
Yeah, I was going to say healing your younger self while you're at it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
What would you say to other artists going through a similar kind of loss?
Um, I think I would say for me, the most helpful question in reconstructing my sense of identity was what do I love? Not what do other people love about me, or what do other people think I'm great at, or what can I make money doing, or what is my ego going to be fluffed by? The question really inverted is what do I love? Because if I'm moving artistically from that place, that completely liberates me. What do I love? Well, I still love writing songs. My voice doesn't sound anything like it used to, but I still love that creativity. I love writing on the page. I love being in wilderness. I know the people who I love the most. Following that instinct really allowed me to recreate a new version of life that I'm really loving, even though it's not one I would have consciously chosen a few years ago.
What helps you stay connected to hope or purpose even on the hardest days?
Ooh, that's such a good question. The writer Tokopah Turner, who wrote the book Belonging, which I loved, she wrote something on her blog in the past couple of years, and it was along the lines of purpose is so much smaller than Western culture makes it out to be. So, for example, if I'm holding my friend's baby, like my purpose is to hold my friend's baby. If I'm cooking a meal for someone, my purpose is to like chop the vegetables with love and serve the meal with love. And so I think for me, finding meaning and love and these kind of concentration moments of purpose that are not linked to some bigger story about my identity, that gives me a lot of hope and makes me feel really connected. So I guess for me, hope is about actually just being in the moment. There's this Buddhist idea that hope is actually like you shouldn't have hope. Like Pema Chodron talks about that. You shouldn't have hope because hope automatically takes you out of the moment, or like it automatically says that what you want in the future is better than what you actually have now. So, yeah, I would say hope. What gives me hope is like actually enjoying each hour, like we were talking about. Um,
So, staying present,
Yeah,
really.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
staying present and also like you were saying, not projecting into the future. Like we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, in a month, someone could say, actually, we have the miracle cure. Everyone with long COVID, you're about to be superhuman Hercules, like we don't know what's going to happen in the upcoming years. So that there are plenty of diseases that have been cured that have had cures cultivated relatively unexpectedly. So we don't know what could happen.
Hmm. Why was it important for you to speak out about how long COVID has affected your life?
Oh, well, I was not going to originally. The singer of this band called Car Seat Headrest has long COVID. And when I found that out, I went to it was then Twitter. I went to his Twitter page and I saw he announced, I'm only playing, X amount of shows this year because I have long COVID and I'm focused on recovery. And there were dozens and dozens and dozens of comments saying, like, it's a vaccine injury, bro, or like, COVID isn't even real, dude. And when I saw that, I thought, I don't have the energy to respond to even one person who would do that to me. And I thought, I'm never going to talk about this. I don't want to talk about an ongoing illness. I don't want to make myself vulnerable in that way. But once I started telling the story of the book, I was realizing just how many people I know who have been completely rerouted from COVID, including, my cousin, one of my best friends, other singers that I know whose voices have changed, not as much as mine, but like significantly. There are so many people I know whose lives have been drastically altered. And I feel like it's important for more people to be talking about it because it'll lead to more attention and more research. And also a sense of community amongst the people who are struggling with it and a sense of validation.
Yeah. I think sharing your story is so powerful and using your voice in that way. And I've spoken to people who, have heard the podcast and now are encouraged to speak out. And I think, how do we get help? How do we get acceptance unless we hear about it more?
Right.
So thank you. COVID has been swept under the rug by mainstream media and the music industry. People shy away from talking about it, probably mostly for contractual reasons, I would think. Do you hope that other people in high profile careers will speak out about their experience with COVID and long COVID?
Hmm. I guess I've been finding hope and seeing a number of people with bigger platforms starting to talk about it. Like the actor Matt McGorry has been talking about it quite a bit. And he has like 1.5 million Instagram followers. So I've actually been very heartened and very inspired by the amount of people who are talking about it. But I think that culturally it is a problem to just immediately move on to whatever this new version of life is. And I think there's like, Western culture has such an element of placation. Like we placate ourselves, whether it's through technology, whether it's through consumerism, whether it's through, I don't know, social media. There's so many ways to temporarily reduce pain and seek pleasure. And I do think like honoring what we have collectively experienced could be really valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, people are numbing out, and there hasn't been, we haven't paused to acknowledge this, mass trauma we've all been through.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the equivalent, I think about like in one person's life, it would be the equivalent of like, someone's husband of 30 years dies, and instead of grieving, she's like, yeah, I'm just going to start going on cruises for the rest of my life and it'll just be fine. Like there, it wouldn't work in an individual person's life. It just, we see what it would happen to one person if they tried to do that. So why do we think it's okay for a collective, multi-million person country? Why is it okay for us to do that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for speaking out about your experience with long COVID.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this podcast and for spreading the word. I'm really glad that it exists.
Thank you so much. Greta's story reminds us that even in silence, there can be strength. That even when something vital to our identity is taken from us, we are still capable of creating beautiful things. If you are looking for a powerful and thought-provoking memoir, Greta's book, The Lost Voice, is available now everywhere you buy your books. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Voices of Long COVID. I hope you found it informative. Please make sure to leave us a review. You can follow Voices of Long COVID on Instagram, TikTok, X, Blue Sky, and YouTube. You will find new episodes as my energy allows, wherever you listen to podcasts. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.